In early 2000, the Taliban's regime attempted to put a set of restrictions and regulations on Arab training camps. This appears to be the first well-documented attempt by the Taliban to regulate the Arab presence in Afghanistan and to enforce rules on the Arab community as a whole. This shift in attitude may have been prompted by increased pressure from abroad, including the United Nations, United States, and Pakistan, to close alleged terrorist training camps on Afghan soil. On October 4th, 1999, a Pakistani delegation visited Kandahar and met with Mullah Omar. The purpose was to ask the Taliban to close down training camps for Pakistan militants and to arrest and hand over suspected Pakistani terrorists. 4 days later, on October 8th, the United States placed Al-Qaeda on its list of foreign terrorist organizations. On October 15th, the United Nations Security Council adopted Resolution 1267, demanding that the Taliban hand over Osama bin Laden or face international sanctions. After the Taliban's ulema investigated the issue and concluded that they could not hand over bin Laden, United Nations sanctions were imposed on November 15, 1999. We do not know exactly what prompted the Taliban to put regulations on the Arabs, whether Pakistani pressure, the UN sanctions, the U.S. terror listing, or a combination of the three. Abu Musab al-Suri's diary notes provide useful hints. In early 2000, al-Suri met with a Taliban official, probably Mullah Rabbani, to discuss the background for the restrictions put on Arabs. As the piece gives unique insight into the reasoning behind the Taliban's political decisions, it is worth quoting at length. Quote, Taliban officials claimed to have been asked by officials in some of the countries he visited about specific individuals who need to be extradited. This is a result of infiltration because the officials are unaware of what is going on among you. Taliban official claims that as a result of being infiltrated, many countries have been able to collect information about the Arabs, and we have the Taliban became baffled by how they gathered all this information about the Arabs. Even Massoud, Hekmatyar, and Sayyaf are accusing the Arabs of being terrorists after you fought along their side in the Afghan-Soviet War. Therefore, the Taliban must manage our affairs secretly and refute all rumors and allegations that are being used to place more pressure on us. The Arabs must re-examine the units and ranks and exclusively check the background of every newcomer and collect all necessary information, and quote. According to al-Suri's notes, the Taliban's primary concern at the time was infiltration of the Arab community in Afghanistan by foreign agents who subsequently accused the Taliban of hosting terrorists on their soil. Sometime before March 3rd, 2000, the Taliban issued a set of 13 points meant to regulate the presence of the Arabs. The 13 points state, among other things, that all foreigners who enter Afghanistan must register at a central office and carry official ID papers they have to live in designated areas. They cannot talk to foreign media or organize press conferences. Any participation in jihad must be approved by the Taliban. The intent of the 13 points seems to confirm that the Taliban's primary concern was infiltration, that they wanted to solve the problem by hiding away the Arab training camps from foreign eyes. Should be noted that the Taliban, in principle, were not against the idea of foreigners participating in militant struggle, as long as it had been approved by the Taliban government beforehand. The 13 points caused a stir in the Arab community, as reflected in the diary notes of Abu Musab al-Suri. It appears that al-Suri, in coordination with other Arabs, worked out a response to the Taliban. The collective concerns of the Arabs, according to al-Suri, were as follows. 1, training camps. 2, family issues, living expenses and residences. 3, identification and ID cards. And 4, political and jihadi activities abroad. For al-Suri, registration and ID cards was out of the question. I have no doubt that my information in possession of the Taliban will be obtained by Pakistan and others, and thus our enemies, he wrote. He also believed the Arabs should be free to reside anywhere in the Emirate without any restrictions, and that we need training camps and not the termination of training. Finally, about jihadi activities abroad. We recommend that each group discusses the issue with the authorities of the Emirate individually. On the issue of the registration ID cards, al-Suri was uncompromising. We refused the registration and the ID cards. He noted along with what appeared like a threat. We informed the Taliban that we are getting ready to leave. After the Taliban issued the 13 points, there were only one or several meetings between Arabs and Taliban officials probably including Mullah Omar himself, to reach a compromise solution. According to al-Suri's diary, he notes he discussed the issue of the 13 points with Abu Layth al-Libi, Abu al-Hadi, and Muhammad Salah. Abu al-Hadi is probably Abu Hadi al-Iraqi, al-Qaeda's overall frontline commander in Afghanistan. Muhammad Salah probably refers to Nasir Fahim al-Nasir, a.k.a. Muhammad Salah, responsible for finances and general relations in Ayman al-Zawahiri's faction of the Egyptian Islamic Jihad. Abu Layth al-Libi, member of the LIFG faction that fought on the Taliban's front lines from 1999. This suggests that the Taliban's restrictions on Arabs concerned all Arab groups in Afghanistan, including al-Qaeda. The Taliban never managed to enforce the 13 points in their original form. However, developments in 2000 suggest that the new regime was at least partly enforced. A few months after the points were issued, al-Qaeda moved from the Al-Faruq camp to the Gara Mountains, northwest of Kandahar city. It was a desolate area with ample space for training camps and shooting practice, but more importantly, it was an area far removed from people. Parallel to opening Al-Faruq, al-Qaeda established the Office of Mujahideen Affairs in Kandahar city, where all new recruits had to register and leave their official ID papers for safekeeping. These security measures were very much in line with the original proposal of the Taliban. The main difference being that it was the Arabs themselves, not the Afghans, that kept rosters of new recruits and who detected and interrogated suspected spies among their ranks. The notion that Taliban ordered al-Qaeda to move the Al-Faruq camp to Kandahar in order to get it out of the public view is plausible. Taliban had behaved in a similar manner in other cases. In 1997, Osama bin Laden was offered to move from the volatile eastern province of Nangarhar, the Taliban's heartland, in Kandahar. A few months later, an al-Qaeda guest house in Kabul was moved by the Taliban to the outskirts of the city because they believed it was under surveillance by Saudi intelligence. It was probably around this time that an Arab liaison committee was established to coordinate requests from the Arabs to the Taliban regime. The committee had 6 members. The members of the liaison committee probably represented individuals in charge of the training camps or frontline sections recognized by the Taliban. Ibn Sheikh ran the Khaldin camp in Khost. Abu Haddad al-Iraqi, also known as al-Ansari, was in charge of al-Qaeda's fighters on the Taliban's frontline. Muhammad Salah was the Egyptian Islamic Jihad's representative to the Taliban. Al-Suri and Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri and Abu Musab al-Zarqawi ran camps in Kandahar and Herat, respectively. The only member of the committee that cannot be positively identified is Ali Abu Zahra. Following the logic outlined earlier, Abu Zahra may be representative of the LIFG faction of Abd al-Hakim Belhaj, which fought on the Taliban's front line at the time, one of the North African groups in Jalalabad. The purpose of the liaison committee was likely to coordinate material support for the Taliban to the various Arab factions. According to al-Suri's diary, typical requests from the Arabs included everything from housing to vehicles, food, and personal expenses. It should be noted that the Arab Liaison Committee included groups that did not support the Taliban militarily. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, in particular, did not believe in sending fighters to the Taliban's front lines. Nevertheless, the Taliban recognized al-Zarqawi's right to running a training camp for Arabs in Herat. This suggests that Taliban supported Arab training camps for ideological reasons, not because they were dependent on Arab fighters or money. Taliban's 13 points specified that the Arabs should only contact the Taliban through an official point of contact. The establishment of the liaison committee contributed to reducing the number of contact points between the Taliban and the Arabs, giving Taliban more centralized control over the communication. From the Taliban side, the 13 points specified that all communication with the Arabs should go through Mullah Abdul Razak, the Taliban's interior minister in Kabul. There were some individuals missing from the liaison committee. For example, Abu Kabab, who ran an explosives and poisons training camp in Darunta outside Jalalabad. Internal al-Qaeda correspondence suggested Abu Kabab in the fall of 1999 or early 2000 moved his training camp to Qargar outside Kabul and joined al-Qaeda. This would explain why he did not have any independent relationship to the Taliban. Moreover, Qargar training site was already represented on the committee by Abu Musab al-Zuri, who was a good friend of Abu Kabab. Abu Kabab's move was in line with the Taliban's policy at the time to move camps from the volatile areas in the periphery to areas under Taliban control. But the Taliban never managed to get all militant groups on the periphery to move to the center. For example, North African militants continued to use Jalalabad and adjacent areas for training between 2000 and 2001, even after the Taliban attempted to close the Darunta camps in mid-2000.